There are many different ways to move lines. The method that's used can depend on whether the circuit is single-phase or three-phase, what the available clearance is, or any number of other factors. In this part of the program, we're going to look at two methods of moving a single-phase line. These are the lift method and the side method. We'll also look at the tools that will be used, the function of the tools, and some basic steps for both methods of moving the line. Remember, your specific procedures may vary somewhat from the steps we look at here. We'll start by looking at the lift method. This is the line that will be moved. The basic principle for moving a single-phase line using the lift method is to use one wire tongue to raise the line straight up. The steps that we looked at for removing and installing tie wires are also some of the necessary steps for moving a line, so many of the hotline tools are the same. Line hose is used to cover the neutral. Pole guard is used to cover the top of the pole and is installed here using a shotgun stick. A hand line is used to lower the neutral and to raise tools and equipment from the ground up to the lineman. Tie sticks are used to remove and install the tie wires, and a wire cutter is used to cut the tie wires as they're unwrapped from the conductor. A wire tongue is used to hold the conductor while the tie wires are removed. The same tongue is also used to lift the conductor. And two wire tongue saddle clamps are used to secure the wire tongue to the pole. An additional piece of equipment that is used to raise the line is a block and tackle. The block and tackle is connected to one of the wire tongue saddle clamps and to a wire tongue blocks clamp that was installed near the end of the wire tongue. By pulling on the rope, a worker on the ground can control the lifting motion of the wire tongue. The initial steps in moving the line using the lift method are the same as those for removing a tie wire. In both cases, the neutral is covered and lowered out of the work area. The pole guard is installed. The tie wire is removed from the conductor on one side of the insulator. The wire tongue is attached to the conductor and clamped to the wire tongue saddles. And the tie wire is removed from the conductor on the other side of the insulator. The next step that the linemen perform here is to install the block and tackle. The stationary block is hooked onto the clevis of the lower saddle clamp, and the movable block may be hooked onto a blocks clamp that has been installed near the end of the wire tongue, as it is here, or it may be connected to the swivel ring on the end of the wire tongue. Then the linemen loosen the lifting tongue saddle clamps, and the worker on the ground pulls on the rope to raise the wire tongue so that the conductor is lifted above the insulator. When the conductor is high enough to provide a minimum clearance between the insulator and the line, the linemen tighten the saddle clamps to hold the wire tongue in place. As the linemen proceed with the job, they're careful to maintain a minimum clearance between themselves and the line. The job here is to replace the insulator. Once the insulator has been replaced, the line can be lowered onto the new insulator. The worker on the ground keeps tension on the rope as the linemen loosen the saddle clamps. Then the rope is carefully let out to slowly lower the conductor. One lineman controls the upper saddle clamp so that he can tighten it, if necessary, to stop the wire tongue. When the line's securely seated on the insulator, the clamps are tightened to hold the wire tongue and the conductor in place while the conductor's tied to the insulator. After the conductor is tied to the insulator, the hotline gear is removed, and the neutral is returned to its original position. Moving a single-phase line using the lift method is fairly easy, but it's extremely important for all crew members to work together so that when the line is moved, it's kept under control. It's also important to remember at all times to maintain a minimum clearance between yourself and any energized lines or equipment. Now, there are times when you need to move a single-phase line when the lift method won't work. For example, there may be something above the pole that keeps you from moving the line high enough, When this happens, the line may be moved using the side method. With the side method, 2 wire tongs are used to move the line out to one side of the pole. Let's look at the tools and the steps needed to move a single-phase line using the side method. The hotline tools that are used for the side method are exactly the same tools that were used for the lift method of moving a single-phase line. One exception is that 2 wire tongs are used instead of just 1. The steps for installing the gear are also nearly the same. However, when the 2 saddle clamps are chained to the pole, they're offset a little so that the lower clamp is not lined up directly below the upper clamp. We'll see why in a minute. When the wire tongs are engaged in the saddle clamps, only 1 clamp is used for each tong, rather than the 2 clamps that were used for a single tong with the lift method of moving the line. We can see now that the reason for offsetting the saddle clamps is so that the upper clamp is not in the way of the wire tong that is engaged in the lower clamp. In addition, the lower saddle clamp is offset to the side that the conductor will be moved. This is so that the wire tongue that it holds does not get hung up on the upper clamp when the line is moved out. The block and tackle is attached to the clevis of the lower saddle clamp and to a blocks clamp near the end of the wire tongue. After the conductor is untied from the insulator, the linemen on the pole loosen the saddle clamps and control the wire tongs. At the same time, the worker on the ground pulls on the rope to slowly lift the conductor off of the insulator. Then the lineman who's controlling the upper saddle clamp carefully swings the conductor away from and to the side of the pole. When both saddle clamps are firmly tightened, the 2 wire tongs hold the conductor out far enough to the side of the pole to provide a minimum clearance between the conductor and the lineman. With the wire tongs in this position, we can more easily see the function that each tong performs. This lower tong, with the block and tackle, is used to lift the conductor off the insulator. It also supports most of the weight of the line. Because of the function it performs, this wire tong is often called the lifting tong. The upper wire tong is used to hold the conductor out and away from the pole. For this reason, it is often called the holding tong. To place the conductor back on the insulator, the procedure for moving the line is reversed. The saddle clamps are loosened and the wire tongs are pivoted so that the conductor is directly above the insulator. Then the worker on the ground lets out on the rope to slowly lower the conductor onto the insulator. Moving a single-phase line using the side method isn't much more difficult than moving the line using the lift method. You do have to use an additional wire tong, and it does require a little more planning and coordination to make sure that the line is moved smoothly and safely. And again, control and clearance are extremely important. Now, many times the circuit you need to work on will be 3-phase. The steps that we looked at for moving a single-phase line are good to know, because many of the same steps are used to move 3-phase lines. We'll look at how to move 3-phase lines in the next part of this program.